to do a review of a portion of the Torah portion, and then, of course, we'll go into the words of the Master. But first, we're going to look at this week's Torah portion, which is Vayeshev, and he dwelt. And he dwelt. In this case, and he is Yaakov. And it begins to go into the, I don't want to say story, but I mean, it is a story of Yosef. Okay, so we're going to read the beginning portion of Vayeshev, Genesis 37. The whole portion is Genesis 37, verse 1, all the way up to 40, verse 23. But we here are going to read Genesis 37, 1 through 11. Genesis 37, verse 1 through 11.
Genesis 37, verse 1. And Yaakov dwelt in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. This is the genealogy of Yaakov. Yosef, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers. And the young men was with the sons of Boha and the sons of Zelpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought an evil report of them to his father. And Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a long robe. But his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers. They hated him and were not able to speak peaceably to him. And Yosef dreamed a dream and told it to his brothers. So they hated him even more. And he said to them, "Please listen to this dream which I have dreamed. See, we are binding sheaves in the midst of the field. And see, my sheaf rose up and also stood up. And see, your sheaf stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf." And his brothers said to him, "Shall you indeed reign over us? Shall you indeed rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed still another dream and related it to his brothers and said, "See, I have dreamed another dream, and see, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowed down to me." And he related it to his father and his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall we, your mother and I and your brothers, indeed come to bow down to earth before you?" And his brothers envied him, but his father guarded the word.
Okay, very good. So when we look at Yosef, interesting fellow he was, Yosef. When we look at Yosef, it's interesting because when you see the things that he dreams here, it's prophetic not only in regards to his own life situation. When you think about where he ends up and how the relationship between his brothers and himself and even his father also, but also we're able to also look and see even here where from a prophetic standpoint, Yosef here kind of exemplifies, personifies Yeshua. And so it's interesting when we look at this, just as it begins and kind of think about not only what we know of the story as it relates to Joseph, but also thinking about Yeshua. But I wanted to just kind of look real quick. When we look at, if we go to verse, well, I guess it begins in verse 2. I mean, you can't, just from a realistic standpoint, we're not thinking about right or wrong or, what is holy and righteous and upright and all of that. But within family, there's, especially among siblings, at least in my day, as far as I know, I don't know how it is now. There's politics in family, the dynamics of things. And Joseph here, being the youngest, I guess this is what they do, but they're violating all of the political rules here. I guess potentially there's a different dynamic because we see here that who he's with here is really the concubines. I'm saying that just because of what we looked at the other day, but the lesser wives of Yaakov and the children of them, when you think about that kind of a situation, it's not necessarily as you might think. They might be older, but they're still kind of connected. The order's different because of this whole multiple situation, something that we kind of don't think about. But just from a family standpoint, you can't you can't act like Joseph acts here and think that anything other than what happens, at least here, happens to him. When, here's this little brother. He comes around. He sees what we do. He goes back and he tells on us. Right? Again, we're not talking about what's right and wrong. We're just talking about what happens inside of families. And so you have the fact that you have Yosef, who is, he's a tattletale. Right? But you not only have that, but then you have the fact that his father, it's interesting here. I'm just looking at this. When you look at verse 3, where it refers to Jacob as Israel here. Again, when you look at how Israel's name was changed, Jacob's name was changed to Israel, and you would think that it will always just be that. Understanding kind of what the name represents, sometimes you may think that when you see Israel, like the thing that's associated with him at that time when it's naming him as that, would be like you would think about like the high road or rightness will be associated with the thing that he's doing. I mean, it's not necessarily that. But in my mind, I kind of think of that. But here, Israel really is a respecter of persons. He's a respecter of persons. He's got to know that for him to deal with, you would think that he would know not to treat these children like this and have everything be okay. But in verse 3, of course, it says it tells us he loved Yosef more than the other. Like, what would your situation be if you had your parent continually saying to a particular child, you're the best, I love you the most, none of these other ones can compare unto you, blah, blah, blah. And it talks about over here, it's interesting, we always talk about the coat of many colors. Look at pull up verse 3 right there. I think King James puts colorful, many-colored, multicolored robe. But that word don't mean that necessarily. Verse 3 should be the last thing there. H6446, the word is pas. You pull that up there. Okay, there it is. Okay, properly the palm of the hand or the sole of the feet. I guess when you look at the hand, the palm is kind of the longest part, right? The sole of the foot is kind of the longest part of it, right? This robe that he had was a long robe. So the sleeves, they reached down to his wrists, and the length of the thing went down to his ankles. Right? It was a long robe. The idea of color is kind of euphemistically understood because of the longness. It makes it kind of royal. And so with royalty, you think of some multicolored, kind of like how when you think about the high priest, where, you know, he had all of these various colors and jewels and things, right? And so the idea here was that this was a royal robe that he received from his father, where, you know, the siblings, they just had just regular, you know, common folk clothes. And so, royal attire. And so again, think about Yosef, and again, the idea that he not only, with these dreams that he's dreaming, not only is prophetic for his own life, but it also points us to Yeshua, because Yeshua, of course, is king, right? Yeshua, of course, is the Prince of Peace, right? And so it's interesting when you think about the fact that Yeshua, when he walked the earth, his brothers, his countrymen, his brothers also hated him. Why? Because of the things that he said that was true. The things that he said was true, and his brothers hated him as a result of it. Right? It was in a different context, but the same thing is the case. Verse 4 talks about the fact that because of the way that Israel treated Yosef, his brothers hated him, and they was not able to speak peaceably to him. They did not have any shalom for their brother, which is kind of something that we do with one another. You know, we shalom one another. Shalom to you, right? We want for our family brethren, sistren, to be able to experience shalom. They, on the other hand, had none of that for their brother. And so when you look at, you know, kind of how this builds and thinking about, you know, what eventually goes and happens to Yosef, it's interesting that, you know, kind of when you look at this from a practical standpoint, you know, when we see the culmination, when it talks about the fact that, you know, all of these things happen for the good of, you know, these things all were the Most High's will. But in order to get to the Most High's will, you had to have these people really behaving, Israel included, in a way that's not correct. Like, he's not acting right by doing this, by treating his children in this way. It's not, even though these prophecies do in fact come true, with the immaturity of this Yosef, you know, he's probably just, you know, look at me, like, Like the father is even like, who do you think you are to have this dream when me and your mother are bound down to you too? Like, who do you think you are? But it still says in verse 11 that, but his father guarded the word. Right? He was able to disconnect himself from the emotional part of it and understand, well, maybe there's something to this. I need to guard, protect this word here. Even though I can't understand it, I don't, have a full understanding of these things that are going forth outside of the emotions that's attached to it. He's still able to guard these words. But I just wanted to kind of think about really quickly just the idea that, sometimes the Most High uses these situations, because it's one thing if, the people, the circumstances and situations, as bad as they are, you're still able to understand how it gets to that. Because these things aren't right. Like, you can't expect for regular people to behave in a right way when the situations and circumstances aren't right. Mm-hmm. The family dynamic is around like the firstborn. Like, he's the one that's supposed to be like this is their culture. He's the one that's supposed to have the things and the partiality. And this whole, because of, the situation that they have, all of that is switched all around. Mm-hmm. And so, not to say that it is right what they did, it's wrong what they did. But it's interesting to look at how the Most High is able to still prevail in spite of the obvious dysfunction that exists over here, and realize that he's still able to use all of that for his good. And the same thing is true when you think about Yeshua. Like, the people, the Anti-Defamation League hate for you to say that the Jews killed Jesus. But they did, though. That's what happened. That's what happened. And they go through the thing and take him to the courts and everything else. They literally wanted for him to die. However, all of that needed to happen for our good. And so it's interesting to look and see the way that the Most High moves and operates, the way he uses people, whether the people are actually right or wrong, the way he uses people for his glory. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions or comments about this part here of the Torah portion before we go on?
I can understand how, Yosef likes to tell on the older kids.
He does like to do that. I don't know where these little people learn this from, but
the baby always.
It's almost instinctual, like he don't even understand things properly, but he does do that. It's funny. I've experienced it. But it's instinctual, right? It's not wrong. It's just what they do, but it's just.
Sometimes they don't understand that, you telling on your older siblings is going to cause problems between you and the older siblings.
I don't even know what the alternative is, but it's just it's problematic to say. Go ahead.
How is it attributed to her? I was in there. I told you too.
So you have an affinity to the.
Yeah, I just think anything you know is right. So I always, what I told, because my father would always say, whatever happens, you tell Papa. So I had all of these older siblings who, like when I was her age, they were dating, they were of age, and I'm thinking dating. So we only had one TV that television, that one house. My father was a baseball fanatic. So when be downstairs with them. My father would go upstairs and he'd say, Papa, bring me back. So I knew that meant to watch them. My one sister
You guys had to understand.
always gave me a quarter. He would say, you could go upstairs. If you go upstairs, I'll give you a quarter. So I would take the quarter and I'd go right upstairs to my father and say, Papa Sam gave me a quarter. And my father would take me in his hand and go back downstairs and he would open my hand and say, what you giving her this for? Y'all ain't gonna be doing nothing down here. He would sit there. So that became a thing for me. So I knew automatically when anything happened, I was telling Papa. So it was, I think it's the order too. There are 13 of us. I'm at the bottom of it. I always said my older brother was like God in the light. He could do no wrong. He, if my father wasn't there, he just automatically stepped in. And I used to be like, you're not Papa, you just my brother. You're not Papa, you just my brother. But my father would always make it so that I knew that if he wasn't there, this is who you're gonna look at. And then you go on down the line.
Yeah.
And we get it from you guys. Because you guys are the ones who put us in that order. You are the ones who, like my sisters, they always had to do my hair. My oldest sister started after she got married, it fell down to the line and stuff like that. So they get it from you all. We got it from our parents, that order. And my mother used to always make me feel like I was really special because I wanted to make up her bed. I just thought that was the greatest thing in the world. I realized the day that bed was half torn up, but it was always, oh yeah, you made her mommy's bed so great. I didn't know she was just priming me for work to pick up, but we get it from you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you look at this situation here with Yosef, it's when you think about like what's actually happened in terms of the fact of him receiving these dreams from the Most High, obviously, where we look at them and they're literally things that, from our perspective, they're literally what's going to happen. When you have these amazing insights that you receive from the Father, for him to have kept it to himself, that would have been wrong as well. But just simply thinking about things from really a carnal perspective, really. It's just interesting to look and see how these things play out because it's almost like they kind of had to be in their carnal mind in order for Most High's will to even come forth. Like if they would have been operating in humility and all of this and righteousness,
Yeah.
what was supposed to happen never would have happened. So it's just an interesting dynamic that we look at, just the way that the Most High uses these imperfect people for his perfect plan.
Yeah.